Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my AM reading video for Friday, June 11th, 2021, continuing in a new month with my tradition of posting it a day later. Even though I haven't made a Friday Reads video in a couple of weeks, I squeaked into filming this late on Friday to get in as much reading as possible. Because it's less than I would have hoped to talk about, but alas. But if you are interested in my reading from last month, which technically spilled over a little into this month, you can check out my May literary newsletter, which I post to my reading and writing blog. I will link it down below. In it, you will find snippets from the Goodreads reviews of all of the books that I ascribed to reading last month. I have a book pick, a book meme. I have news of the literary world that caught my fancy, and more, so check it out. Here's something else that I am carrying over from May. I am very slowly reading through this collection of short stories, Dorothy Parker's Complete Stories, which I started last month in honor of both Jewish American Heritage Month and also International Short Story Month. And I actually do intend to finish this thing this month rather than drag it on forever. But for now, I'm still really eking through one story at a time per week, so, you know. And that being said, I think I've run into my first story in here that I don't actually care for that much. It's more of a character or caricature study in a short amount of pages. It's the shortest short story in the collection thus far for me, and again, I've only read a very few stories in this collection so far. But anyway, it was published in 1925, and it's called A Certain Lady, and it's about an upper-class woman who says that she's doing, you know, incredible things with her time, and isn't just sort of being idle and shallow, but that doesn't really turn out to be the case as you go through the story. And so, you know, there's nothing else there in terms of other characters and the plot situation sort of thing. It's actually told in, I guess it would be second person. I mean, it's, you know, it's an I addressing a you, which is also something that I haven't seen before in her other stories. So it kind of read, you know, she's obviously trying to do a critique of this sort of character, but it's coming off more as, you know, gossipy nature of a caricature, and it's just not reaching me today, so eh. Speaking of a gossipy nature in a work of American classical literature, I have just under 100 pages to go in Absalom Absalom by William Faulkner, and thank goodness, because I actually do have to return it to the library on Saturday. Those of you who watched, I think, a book haul I did back in March know that I've had this book out for a long time, and I kept extending my hold as long as I could and letting other books, you know, privileging other books in the meantime to read. But now I've officially reached the point where it's either read it or lose it. So I am reading it. I've only read a couple of Faulkner books, but I have fond memories of reading A Sound and the Fury way back when in high school. I think it was high school, it might have been 8th grade, middle school. Anyway, I had fond memories of that, so when I thought about what else I might want to read from him to, you know, expand my knowledge of this Gothic Southern writer who's very important in American letters, I decided upon Absalom Absalom because the character of Quentin technically features prominently in this book, and he is one of the main characters from A Sound and the Fury. And this book takes place a few months before his section in A Sound and the Fury in 1909, when he first is conversing with an elderly neighbor about her family and the drama in her family, which also adheres to the fact that the South is in a state of decay because this once prominent family is suddenly, you know, a laughingstock. And, you know, he talks with her and he talks with his father about it. And it's just this obsession with the downfall of this family. But, you know, unlike The Sound and the Fury, first of all, it's gossip about people that aren't even in his life. And all of the action is like from 50 years in the past. Like with The Sound and the Fury, at least, which is also stream of consciousness, a lot of it still is about the people narrating it, and it's about events happening in the moment. Whereas this is Quentin and usually his father going on long screeds of just gossipy narrative about this family and all of the ways that, you know, it's falling apart. And to be honest, I don't know how much of it I would have even followed or have been following if there wasn't extensive information in the back, or at least, well, there's a timeline of actual events as they occur for this other family, the Coldwell Sutton family. And there's also some brief character sketches of the various characters in this crazy family who come in and out of the picture. Mostly I'm reading this book and thinking about how it's bad of an idea it is for Quentin to get obsessed with the downfall of this family and what it means to the downfall of the South, when he's doing the same thing with his own family and will in fact take his own life in The Sound of the Fury because of that. So he really did not deserve this drama on top of that drama. I actually went ahead and decided Thursday night to watch James Franco's adaptation of The Sound and the Fury, I guess just to sort of try to immerse a little more in this world again. And in the Quentin section, a lot of it is Quentin looking back on fatalistic comments that his father told him. And it jarred with me because, you know, on a technical level, Quentin and his father going on in this book is just, you know, a vast stream of consciousness that no people would actually talk like. I mean, your voice would run hoarse before most of these paragraphs even finished. So, I mean, I know we're not technically supposed to be thinking about that. We're supposed to be thinking about what they're saying, or, you know, this convoluted nature of the downfall of this family. And I feel like there's some sort of forest that I'm missing for the trees, I guess, about the nature of this writing and the emotional pain of this stream of consciousness. I mean, you know, back in, I think even starting in high school, I think I liked stream of consciousness more than I do now. I've definitely changed. And to be fair, again, in comparison to Sound and the Fury, this is mostly a novel of gossiping about other people from 50 years ago, whereas The Sound and the Fury is at least about the characters in the center, and it mostly takes place, you know, as they're thinking about their lives. It's, you know, on the page. Anyway, but I guess I'm still glad I gave this book a go, just to, you know, occasionally dip my toe into, you know, American classic literature. And I'm trying to tell myself now, I feel bad about not liking this book as much because it feels like it's the mark of, you know, someone who's an ignoramus, you know, to not like classical American literature from someone who's, you know, known as one of our best authors. But last month I read an 1,000-page biography of Sylvia Plath, so maybe I'm in the mindset of telling myself that it's okay to not like this Faulkner book, and I can still consider myself literate. I will slog through the rest of it and hopefully, you know, take some stuff out of it as I go. I've kind of been staying afloat and like thinking a little bit about the characters and the themes and the drama, but none of this really is going to stick with me, and I don't really think it's that memorable, and that's okay. In a completely different genre and feel, the next book I want to talk about is The ICKABOG by J.K. Rowling, a very recently published book of very accessible middle grade fiction, fantasy fiction. This is the book I chose in my recently posted page 112 tag, where I chose 3 random unread books from my shelves and read page 112 from each. I'll link to that video down below. Anyway, I decided afterwards to add this book to my TBR, and so far I am liking it. I'm only a couple of chapters into it. I decided to pick this one up today rather than Absalom Absalom because I wanted to talk about more in this video. So I just wanted to at least start this book a little bit and get a feel. And what this book is about is a fantasy, sort of fairy tale-esque coded kingdom called Cornucopia, ruled by a man called Fred the Fearless, who, whether or not he's fearless, it's probably also a little bit of a lie. I'll actually go straight for the language one of the narrators of this book uses, Daisy Dovetail. She calls him selfish, vain, and cruel. And overlaying this story of a kingdom that for the most part is pretty happy. Most of the country is doing pretty well for itself, except for the marshlands in the outer, I guess, outer portion of Cornucopia, where it's not so much of a cornucopia of goods out there. People live in a rank and fetid environment and are poorer and are generally seen as other by all of the citizens of their country, like, you know, as people who are poor and lazy and not worth much attention. And the people in the marshlands talk about a monster called the Ichabod, which is, you know, one of those almost folklorish monsters, really. Like, you know, there's no real proof that he exists, and in fact, most people don't think he does exist. But when King Fred hears that someone is calling him vain and selfish and cruel, he decides to try to counteract people's opinion of him by, you know, trying to listen to some of their complaints. And at one point, a man from the marshland comes in and he claims that his dog was eaten by the Ichabod, and he, you know, wants somebody to, you know, teach that Ichabod a lesson. And, you know, most people are supposed to laugh this off because the Ichabod, of course, isn't real, and this silly marshlander is just giving in to superstition. But Fred decides, you know, a great way to show the people that he's not vain and selfish and cruel, because that's what he cares about really is, you know, trying to quell that voice inside of him that says he is vain and selfish and cruel, and how can he do that? It's less about the acts themselves, but he decides to take his men and go to the marshlands to fight the Ichabod, and that's more or less where I am right now. Well, I mean, actually, they've gone, and something happened in the marshland. It seems less likely that they encountered the Ichabod, although the king thinks they did. It seems more likely that in the fog, his advisors were scared by a noise and they accidentally shot someone that they weren't supposed to, and that they covered it up by saying it was the Ichabod that did it. And they're building up this narrative for the king that indeed the Ichabod is real and that they all fought valiantly against it, but, you know, what can you do? And that's more or less where I am right now. So it seems like part of the kingdom's mythology of, you know, goodness in Cornucopia is starting to tumble down a little bit. And the king is off balance, first by these accusations that seem to be true of his vanity and selfishness, and now by the Ichabod, or by the legend of the Ichabod, more accurately. Whether or not it exists is up to chance. You know, this is a middle grade book. You do think ultimately a monster might have to show itself. But yeah, that's where I am. I think it's pretty enjoyable. You know, it's straightforward, especially for the audience, although you can see the underlying themes that are actually more important than the monster, really, about you know, the types of people we present as. We're looking at a person in power who, and his advisors, who are really more cartoonish than he is, and how they're not living up to their ideals, and or at least what they want to be their ideals. It seems like for the most part they just sort of want praise all the time, and that warps them a bit, and they're, you know, not always treating their people with respect, and you know, also I guess some of the other people of Cornucopia are othering, you know, the people on the sidelines of their society, and saying these people, you know, really aren't worth our attention or our care. So these are obviously some themes that Rowling is going to be looking into in this book. And on top of all of that, you know, she had released this book in installments online and had a bit of competition about young kids who made amazing drawings of the characters in the book that now appear in the pages. I mean, I'm kind of stunned that somebody who's more than, less than half my age, I guess, could draw something so amazing, because I certainly couldn't draw something like this, just saying. I will be reporting back next week to tell you what I think of the rest of the book. In the meantime, I guess I'll end with talking about disclaiming J.K. Rowling, because about a year ago I wrote a post on one of my blogs that kind of was disclaiming J.K. Rowling, or at least talking about her transphobic remarks that sort of spiked a little bit, I think, about a year ago. And since then she's become very much a persona non grata, and to the point where, you know, sensitivity culture, I suppose I could call it, makes me pause and thinking, well, can I talk about any of her art without acknowledging the fact that her views can be pretty toxic? And of course, this is an issue that divides, I think, a lot of, well, not only BookTube, but the broader literary community. Well, you know, when it comes to books anyway, it would, you know, come under our auspices, about whether I should even talk about Rowling's transphobia in this book, which at least I don't think we'll be talking about that issue directly, and instead I can look at the art for what the art is, or if I owe an explanation, because otherwise people are supposed to be ignoring Rowling, because there's a lot of good books out there that are written by people with less power and people who don't use their platforms to spread hate. So I actually, in my last video, the page 112 tag, I did post that disclaimer, and then I thought of the people who might be upset that I post such a disclaimer rather than just, you know, analyze the art for what the art is rather than for who the artist is, and how I guess I felt compelled even to write a disclaimer and talk about J.K. Rowling because, well, going back to Absalom Absalom for a second, I guess I could talk about the fact that, you know, whatever Faulkner believed, there is a lot of racism just packed into this book. You know, it's just, you know, just packed in. I'd say there's a casual disregard for black life in this book that is worse even than anything that Rowling has said publicly about the transgender community, which in and of itself is pretty awful. So just saying, the art itself in this book is pretty darn racist. And I would say that I personally believe that reflects the accuracy of the characters involved, but that being said, it is, you know, very disturbing to read the racism in this book, but I didn't feel the need to repudiate Faulkner in any way. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I really don't associate myself much with Faulkner. Even in appreciating The Sound and the Fury as I do, I don't feel like he's my guy. The way in which I associate with J.K. Rowling and the way in which the Harry Potter books especially made such an impact on my life. I mean, not even only in reading them, but in the connections that I made with human beings outside of them, and how it influenced my own writing, in fact. So my need to disclaim J.K. Rowling comes from the fact that I actually associate with her a lot, and I respect her a lot in other areas. I mean, she's also been an advocate for charity and for kindness and for the Jewish community, as it, in fact, which I'm a part of. So the fact of her transphobia hits even closer to home, because otherwise I really do associate with her. And I guess that's why I would feel more of a need to disclaim the bad or acknowledge the flaws in this person who I otherwise admire and artistically made such an impact on my life. So anyway, that's just long and rambly, yeah. But otherwise, I think I'm going to focus now on the art. So there we have it. And finally, I will end this video with what is on the docket next, and I will be reading this book, These Days Are Ours, by Michelle Haimoff. This is part of a 2021 goal I have for myself to rid my Goodreads shelf of stuff I put on my TBR back in 2016. It went a little slower for a little while because of the BookTube prize. I'll just blame the BookTube prize, but I'm not reading for the prize for the next couple of months. And so I am returning specifically to try and smash out 3 of the Jewish-themed books that I added to my TBR and that I now own back in 2016. And anyway, I will read from the back. 6 months after September 11th, New Yorkers are instructed to get on with their lives, despite the terror advisories, ongoing bomb threats, and mail that may contain anthrax. For Haley, jobless after college and living in her family's Fifth Avenue penthouse, getting on with life means getting closer to Michael Brenner, the Princeton graduate who seems to have it all. The city feels on the brink of apocalypse, and seeking out any sort of future seems pointless. So Haley and her friends, Katie, already working at Morgan Stanley, Randy, a trust fund kid who wears sweaters with holes in them, and Jess, confident of her true success regardless of her present inertia, stay out all night, dream up getting-rich-quick schemes, and aspire to greatness while questioning how much of that greatness really matters. But when Haley meets Adrian, a transplanted Pennsylvanian and recent Brown graduate who doesn't belong to Haley's privileged milieu, she begins to realize that her view of the world might not be the only one there is. So yeah, this is basically a Bildungsroman of seeing the world for broader than your penthouse, which seems to first be, you know, set off by the events of 9/11 that proved, I think, to a lot of America that our world was less stable than we might have thought it was. And it's an interesting time to be you know, getting out of college, which is slightly older than I am, but certainly uncertainty meets uncertainty in that case, even in the privileged class. But yeah, I mean, as is with anything, mostly I'm looking forward to the relationships and hope that they'll teach us something true about characters and humanity. And I am curious to see how 9/11 fits on top of that. So that about covers it for me now. We are officially upon the weekend again, and I'm hoping to quickly finish the 2 books I'm still in the middle of here, and then get on to the next book. Because as you can tell, I still haven't officially completed a June book yet this month, so what do you know? And I have a lot more coming up that I hope to be getting through this month. But I do have a weekend coming up, huzzah! And not much else going on for it. Actually, on Saturday, my synagogue is officially opening its doors again to the full public because DC vaccination is going well enough that the mayor lifted those restrictions, and so they are happily inviting everyone back. But they are still broadcasting the service on Facebook Live, and I kind of think I might just stay home, you know, not rush into things immediately, even though I'm fully vaccinated and all of that. I guess I'm still feeling that residual nervousness about all of these months that we've been living under quarantine, even though in DC things are pretty rapidly changing in the DC area. You know, people are wearing their masks a lot less, and life is slowly opening up again. We're even, as I understand it, going to get a partially, at least in-person, National Book Fest and in September. And that is something that I might not be able to stay away from so easily. So anyway, that's my existential crisis of the weekend. Expect me back on this channel later in the week to do my author's answer video series. Having to do with answering writerly questions from the AuthorTube community. So stay tuned. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.